Advance and be recognized, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sitrep podcast, your forward operations base for all things military and historical wargaming. I am your host, Ariskimi Jim, and today we're taking a look at some bleeding-edge, modern-era tactical wargaming. So modern, in fact, that it actually hasn't happened yet, and to be honest, I hope it never does. We're taking an updated look, or updated guess might be a better way to put it, at how British mechanized and armored operations might look in the year, say, 2028 to 2030. The system we're going to be using today is an old favorite of ours, Avalon Hill's classic Panzerleader. Now, those of you who have been with us for a while know that we've used expansions and updates like the Arab-Israeli Wars or Tactical Combat Middle East by Toshash Miniatures to continuously update and bring the Panzerleader system further and further forward into the modern era. We've looked at what the U.S. Army and American allies might look like in a potential ground war against the Chinese in Taiwan. We've put the U.S. Marine Corps up against the Australians in the biannual Talisman Sabre exercises. And we predicted the Battle of Advika 2.5 years before Russia even invaded Ukraine. Well, before they invaded Ukraine openly, that is. Now it's time to show the British a little love. I mean, we've had them play the villains a little bit in our recent games at Concord and Bunker Hill, but here we're talking about the force they have deployed in Estonia, part of NATO's Enhanced Forward Presence program. The British have about a battalion of 900 men or so, give or take, built around Challenger 2 main battle tanks and Warrior MCVs. This is all part of the British Operation Cabrit. So what our scenario today is going to postulate is what happens if in 3 or 4 years the Russians decide to take a poke at the Baltic States, and the British find themselves part of an Article V NATO response. Now, thankfully, this scenario is pretty far-fetched, I mean, considering just how well the Russians aren't doing in Ukraine, but it's an excuse to whip up some ultra-modern British counters and try them out in a small game. Now, a couple of quick disclaimers here. We are not putting that whole British battalion on the table. Panzerleader could certainly handle it, but this is just a small scrimmage game, more of an experimental playtest with some new counters. And number 2, I am going to be taking the best guesses, yes, educated guesses I can, as far as the rollout and deployment of programs like the Ajax, the Ares, the Boxer, and the Challenger 3. All of these programs are still under development and still being rolled out in the British Army, subject to change at the whim of the MOD. So, as I've kind of already mentioned, we're going to be replacing the Challenger 2 with the Challenger 3, with unit values based on the most recent unclassified technical data that I've been able to find. We're also going to be replacing the Warrior MCV with the Ares, Ajax, and Boxer AIV and CRVs, and we're going to be using the most recent British battalion tables of organization and equipment, although once again, we are not bringing in the whole battalion. We are, however, going to be bringing in some tanks and mixing them in with the armored infantry, per the battle group doctrine, because what happens here is homogeneous peacetime formations like infantry battalions and armored battalions get to the field and then they start to form mission-based mixed arms combat forces for combat operations. Also, please remember, this is just going to be a small pickup game, so there won't be any attack helicopters, fixed-wing airstrikes, MLRS, off-board artillery, drones, anything like that. There's plenty of time to expand into those kind of assets later. This is a brand new Panzerleader force on its first time out, so baby steps, people. How will our British armor of the future fare against the invading Russians in the uncertain years ahead? Let's head over to the footage and find out. Okay, so here is our map board for today. 33 hexes across and 20 hexes from top to bottom. The equivalent of 2 of the original map boards that used to come in the box sets back in the day. The other thing to mention is we are playing with 150 meter hexes. The other thing to keep an eye on are the 5 objective hexes in the game. So our first objective hex is this big concrete building here that is part of what looks like this crossroads and this big railroad station here. We also have this high ground here for the defender. That's going to be the British coming in from the west side of the table, and same for the Russians over here on the eastern side of the table. We also have this little crossroads down here, and finally this big concrete building complex smack dab in the middle of the board. That's probably some industrial site or an agricultural site, something like that. When I build these scenarios, I always put objective hexes on the table. That's how I decide victory, and I always make sure it's an odd number, so there's never any doubt. At the end of turn 8, he who controls the most objective hexes wins the game. Taking a look at the forces that we have included in today's game, let's start off with the British. I have a rather fanciful name for their task force, but it's made up of units drawn from two real formations. The King's Royal Hussars, those are the tanks, and the Yorkshire Regiment, those are the infantry. These units aren't chosen completely at random, but these are among the units that have deployed to Estonia. So, starting off with the tanks, we are looking at some Challenger 3 main battle tanks. The main platoon, the real 4-tank standard Panzerleader platoon, is the one with the full attack value of 56 and the defense factor of 36. Taking a look at this unit over here, you'll notice that the defense factor is reduced and the attack factor is halved. This is a 2-tank section. Speaking of 2-tank sections, we have the same thing here for a command element. That's going to be the commander's tank and the second-in-command's tank. Moving down to the infantry, we've got 3 platoons of Boxer mechanized infantry vehicles, and each platoon is carrying a platoon of rifles. As far as I can tell, the Boxer is what's going to be carrying the main rifle platoons. And then somewhat heavier, we have the Ares armored infantry vehicle. These are tracked, and these are the guys that are going to be carrying the what the British Army, I think, calls specialist platoons or specialist troops. And by that we mean the Assault Pioneers, the L-16A2 mortars, and the anti-tank platoon. By the way, that is going to include both NLAWs and Javelins. Notice that I have sort of combined the recon and sniper platoons because I think the orders of battle call for them like 16 and 19 men apiece. Those are really small platoons, so I've sort of combined them into one full-strength Panzerleader platoon. Notice that they do have the extended attack range of 4, however. Then we have a reduced Boxer section. Again, this is another 2-vehicle section that is carrying the battalion headquarters, and one of the Ajax combat reconnaissance vehicles. This is basically the same chassis as the Ares armored infantry vehicle, but it's got a big honking turret on top carrying a 40mm autocannon. Moving over here to the Russians, we're using my old friends from the 1st Guards Tank Army. What I'm doing here is I'm using one of their not so great, not their first line component formations. I'm not using any of their Guards Tank divisions, anything like that, because I'm sticking with T-72s, BMP-2s. So again, that's why we're using the 27th Motor Rifle Brigade, which is a part of the 1st Guards Tank Army, but it's not their Sunday punch. So we're starting off with 2 full companies of T-72s. Again, each counter in Panzerleader is a platoon. So a company of 3 platoons, another company of 3 platoons. We've got 2 more companies of BMPs. Each company of BMPs is carrying a company of conscript infantry. Again, not the first line stuff that you see for the Russian army. We do have some BTR-82s though. One of them is going to be carrying the heavy weapons section, and one of them is going to be carrying the headquarters section. Okay, so let's go ahead and kick off turn 1. So the question is, who is going to move first? I'll let the British choose whether or not they want to go first or second. They're going to go ahead and move first. And the reason I give the British the choice is they're probably going to have better drone surveillance, air reconnaissance, satellite coverage, and if nothing else, the Estonian people are probably going to be on their side. So long story short, take your first shot. They're going to be better informed about the Russians than vice versa. So the British are going to move first. They're going to blitz onto the board and take as many of these victory hexes as they can. And what that's going to do is it's going to force the Russians to come in on the eastern side of the table and assault the British in place. Come in probably along this general line, cross a lot of open ground, and that's going to probably give the British the first good crack at killing heavy Russian units as the assault comes in. Hopefully this will nullify the Russian edge in numbers a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and start off with the Challengers. The Challengers only have a movement rate of 11, which is kind of slow for a modern battle tank. Apologies to all the Challenger fans out there, but you got to admit, the Challenger is not the speed demon on the battlefield. But they are going to use the road. The British can come in, of course, on any of these 3 roads on the western side of the board. And as long as they stay on the road, they get double movement rate. So this first platoon of challengers will start off as, okay, that cost them 1, because again, on the road, double movement rate. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and they can reach, I think I'll put them there. This way they can cover this northern arc with their big guns. Alright, so that's the main platoon of Challenger 3s. The headquarters section is going to hang back just a little, and the other tank section is going to, let me make sure that I have the southern wing covered here. So, alright, cool. Alright, now my northern wing is a little exposed, so I'm going to want to put some, let's see here, let's get those NLAWs and javelins up there. So they are loaded inside the vehicle, and these Ares AIVs are a lot faster. They move at 14, so let me see where I can put them. Let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let me do that differently. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, because he has to go up a hill. He's off-road, he has to go up a hill, and he's moving through trees. So that's +2 to the movement cost on that hex. Alright, so he's there in woods. He doesn't have time to unload the infantry yet, but he does have the missiles sort of in place. Next turn, he'll go ahead and debus, and they'll be ready to go. I won't make you guys watch all the movement. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the British movement, and then we'll have the Russians come on, and that will complete turn 1. Okay, so the British are now all deployed. Some quick highlights. I've got my scouts and my snipers actually way up forward, because the Russians are going to move toward this objective hex. I don't know if I want to give it to them completely for free, though. I have an infantry platoon watching out for this objective hex back here. My mortars, I'm not sure how much good they'll do, but they are deployed back there ready to help out. My commander is already out of his boxer, and he is setting up his tea. It's another leisurely afternoon back at battalion staff. I do have my Ajax combat reconnaissance vehicle with that 40mm chain gun trying to cover this northern flank a little bit. I'll be honest, that might be a little weak. And of course, we already went over where all the big challengers are. The British are still getting into position a little bit, but I do have 4 out of the 5 objective hexes currently occupied, so right now the British are winning 4-0. However, the Russians haven't even arrived yet, so how about we go ahead and move over to the Russian turn. Honestly, that northern flank is looking a little tasty, because the British don't have a whole lot up there. So how about I take my first company of T-72s, they will not use the road movement rate, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they're on the road now, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They're going to try and turn that northern wing there. And to be fair, you know what? Once you sort of commit to something, especially when you're playing the Russians, I'm going to go for it. Now, right now, that Ajax never saw them for long enough to draw a bead of opportunity fire. Again, you have to spend a full quarter of your movement rate in continuous enemy line of sight in order to trigger opportunity fire. They were screened behind these buildings, and also, to be fair, the Ajax is sort of blinded a little bit because he's further back from the shoulder of this little ridge here. So, not ideal for the British. The Russians are going to go ahead and take advantage of that by making a big armored push there. They might use some of this tree cover next turn. They're going to try and turn the British flank. So we'll see how that works out. Meanwhile, I think I'm going to take one company of my motor rifles. I'm going to go for this objective. I mean, I've got to grab it. And then I'm going to use my second company of motor rifles. I'm going to occupy these 2 hexes here. Rather than, doodle on my stupid little map, how about I just go ahead and I start doing them? They're going to sort of be a screening force, because, clearly the British are going to be wanting to redeploy out of their center to address these threats on their northern and southern wings. But if I have at least some motor rifles here, they won't be able to divest their center entirely because there is an objective hex in there. So hopefully I'm going to use superior Russian numbers here to stretch out the British a little bit. Down here I've got my first company of motor rifles. They're not going to use a road. 1, 2, 3, 4. It costs them to go up the hill. 5, 6. They're going to have to stay there because they do want to unload their infantry. So I'll go ahead and unload them in just a second. To show whether or not a unit is loaded or not, if the infantry unit is on top of the transport unit, it's considered to be unloaded. Notice all the British units are still loaded. They haven't had time to unload yet. And then I'm just going to go ahead and reinforce this push to the north here with these. Oh, careful, one of those is my headquarters unit. I don't want to get too crazy with him. So I'll put the heavy weapons there and the headquarters safe in these buildings. And yeah, that's going to be the lead elements of 27th Motor Rifle Brigade on the table. That's more or less going to wrap up turn 1, because in Panzerleader you fire first and then you move. Clearly nobody was on the board at the beginning of turn 1, so everybody's done their movement. That sort of finishes up an abbreviated turn 1. We're going to go now to turn 2 and see how the British respond to this Russian move, really threatening the British left flank up there in the north. Okay, we're now on turn 2. The British, unfortunately, never really got that expected first good crack at the Russians coming across open ground. The Russians chose not to blindly move across open fields, and in fact, now the British have to scramble a little bit to redeploy against this threat here to the north. So this little Ajax with that 40mm, he's not stopping 24 T-72s. Each tank is a platoon of about 4 vehicles. So he's going to immediately fall back. 1, 2 for moving through woods. 3, 4, 4.5, 5. He's going to make sure he keeps this flank covered as much as he can. Actually, you know what? That javelin system isn't really going to get a good shot on anything either. It's too close. The Russians are already too close. By the time the Russians spend a quarter of their movement rate, they're going to be way too close to these javelins. So he's going to fall back a little bit too. He's still loaded. Now he only moved 1, 2, 2.5, 3. Now he has enough movement rate to unload. So I'll go ahead and unload him. Now we're going to, yeah, we got to get some challengers up there, big time. All right, so 1, 2, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5. They got plenty of movement. They can get up there. And yeah, the Russians and the British still cannot see each other. Again, do note that they are blocked by this intervening terrain elevation here. In fact, let's go ahead and go on to our Russian movement, at least on this part of the table. Now, the Russians have a problem, because if they just go blasting up this bridge, they're going to run right into opportunity fire from all these challengers. So, let's see here. Still can't be seen. If they move here, it's 1 movement point for occupying a new hex, obviously, 2 for moving uphill, and 3 for moving through woods. So that is 3 out of 12 total movement. That is 1/4 of your movement rate. They're now eligible for opportunity fire. So they're going to go here instead. Actually, this platoon of challengers can still see them, believe it or not. And now they're in the open, but they've only spent 2 movement points. You know what? No matter what they do, they're going to wind up in line of sight eventually anyway. So they're just going to try and do it in such a way where the British can't immediately open fire on them. In other words, not spending 1/4 of their movement rate in British line of sight. So, 1, 2, platoons. You know what? The Russians are just going to go for it. I mean, they are Russians. Yeah, so their basic objective here is going to be to force these challengers into a bit of a dilemma. To, you know, either stand and die, because the challengers will knock out at least 1, maybe 2 platoons of these T-72s, but then the survivors will easily destroy the challengers. Russian tanks don't double in firepower all the way out to half range like British guns do, but they do double out to 4 hexes, and everything is within 4 hexes, so we're looking at 6 platoons times what's going to be 64 each, again double of 32. That's 360 and change. Yeah, I'm sorry. Even a Challenger with a 36 enhanced defense is not going to stand up to that. So the British are going to get their one big shot, and then they're going to have to get out of there, to be honest. Let me go ahead and finish up some Russian movement here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and they will unload. Let's get some infantry in there. So yeah, they've only spent half of their movement rate, so they're able to unload. Do the same here. Oh, that's the headquarters section. I can't do that. There we go. I knew I had some more BMPs here somewhere. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And yeah, that's close enough for them to unload as well. Yeah, so we are putting pressure, infantry pressure on top of everything else here against this British objective hex. See there in those concrete buildings. And again, we're going to dilemma crowbar those challengers off of there. It is going to cost the Russians, though. The Russians are going to take a really good shot in the teeth from at least some of these challengers, but the challengers are going to have to bug out. Okay, down here at the southern edge of the table, the British have really decided to challenge the very predictable Russian move to occupy that first objective hex there on their high ground. So on their turn, they shoved forward with the reconnaissance and sniper platoon. They did have enough movement rate this time to dismount from their Ares armored infantry vehicle, and they are being backed up by 2 challengers. Again, that's the 2 tank section of challengers. So that's a formidable little Overwatch force. They couldn't quite take it. They didn't have enough movement rate to quite get there, at least not in a unified sort of a position. So they decided to all stick together and hang 1 hex back. And then on the Russian turn, this is the bottom of turn 2, yeah, they're going to go ahead and rush forward and occupy that hex. So these 2 conscript infantry were close enough to get there. Again, we're using 150 meter hexes, so they have a movement rate of 2. This guy couldn't quite reach it, so he's hanging back a little bit. So to fill in that hex as much as I could, the Russians put in an empty platoon of BMP. Meanwhile, the other 2 empty BMPs, these are the guys that were carrying all that infantry, moved forward, and this guy actually should be in that hex. And what they're doing is they're sort of trying to provide some kind of flank support on either side here against the British, who are of course going to be fighting back and trying to kick the Russians off of this objective hex. Now, the British are actually in more trouble here than it might seem. I mean, yeah, we got a bunch of BMPs and conscript infantry charging challengers. I mean, come on. Infantry are deadly against tanks up close in Panzerleader. Anyone who plays Panzerleader will tell you infantry close assaults against tanks are pretty nasty. In Arab-Israeli wars, if your scenario takes place after 1973, the Egyptian RPG rule kicks in. And yeah, infantry close assaulting specifically against enemy armored vehicles. This doesn't apply against enemy infantry or fortified positions. But against enemy armored vehicles, they triple in value because of, again, RPGs, laws, grenade launchers, who knows what. So yeah, the British are going to have to use some opportunity fire to break up this attack, because these 2 lead platoons of conscript infantry are close enough. They can now close assault against those challengers. And as far as BMPs go, they're right up close. They all have 30mm autocannons, and there are 12 of them against just 2 challengers. I mean, one of them is going to get lucky sooner or later. It's scarier than it looks. So let's go ahead and see if the British can use some opportunity fire to shoot their way out of this predicament. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is fire our recon and snipers and the 50 cal on our Ares IFVs. Believe it or not, they're going to shoot at the BMP. Now, I know what some of you are saying, Risky Jim, you can't fire I-class weapons against armored targets. Actually, yes you can in Arab-Israeli wars, assuming that you're within 2 hexes. They do allow that. And also, I mean, please tell me that you don't think the 50 cal on an Ares is going to be able to pop a hole in a BMP from 150 meters away. Now, they don't double like A-class weapons or anything like that. But I do have 2 6s here, and they're going up against this 6 that is 2-to-1 odds. We're going to poke on this guy that is out in the open, and this platoon that's out in the open. So, yeah, our first shots of the game, we're going to go ahead and cook off and see what we can get. 2-to-1 odds, no modifiers. So here we go. One. Okay, that will definitely get it done. These BMPs are hit and burning, and they're knocked off the table. I'll put a rec counter there in just a second, and that's going to be the opportunity fire from this Ares and from, again, those scout snipers. So, awesome. Now we are looking at the challengers. Okay, now the challengers are going to fire, of course, at the infantry. We've got to break up this incoming cat attack. Alright, so notice that the challengers have the A-star weapons class. Now, normally in Panzer Leader, when an A-class weapon fires at soft targets like trucks or infantry, they have to reduce by half. But A-class weapons, A-star class weapons, I should say, have dual-purpose munitions. So there's all kinds of heat rounds, high explosive rounds, canister rounds, Lord knows what else that those challengers are carrying. They don't have to divide in two when they're shooting against soft targets. They don't double like H-class weapons at point-blank range. Don't get me wrong. Long story short, take your second shot. That 28 is going to apply fully against... I'm just going to engage one of them. Because if I engage both of them, it's 28 against 12. That's a sloppy 2-to-1. Add 1 for Woods. That's not good. I can only kill with a 1. So I'm going to go ahead and just destroy one of those 2 conscript platoons. That's going to be 28 versus 6, 4-to-1. Add 1 to the die roll, however, because the Russians are in Woods. 2, that will definitely get it done. So he's also been destroyed. And now these British units have taken their turn a little early. They've taken their fire. Some of them can still move, some of them can't, depending on whether or not they're eligible for split move and fire. But yeah, the Russians do have that objective hex. This battle is definitely ongoing. They've got reinforcements on the way. This issue is far from decided. The British are also under incredible pressure here in the northern part of the battlefield, again with all these T-72s that we were looking at before. So we're now at the beginning of British turn 3. They're going to go ahead and fire these chieftain units, and then, yeah, to be honest, they're going to beat feet out of there quick, or else they're going to lose the game right here. Okay, so this full Challenger platoon with a 56 attack factor, they are going to fire straight into the point-blank T-72s. So an A-class weapon point-blank against an armored target does double, so that 56 is actually read as 112. Holy crap. Alright, so 112 versus 20. Yikes. That is going to be resolved at a 5-to-1. Let's go ahead and check this out. 4 definitely gets it done. That's going to be a destroyed platoon of T-72s. They are out of there. So yeah, he is smoked. Alright, and then he's going to use his split move and fire to get out of there. So certain units with a turret, it's called the turreted AFV mobility rule, if they have this ability, which Challengers definitely do, they can now use half their movement. So he now has really 5.5 movement points. So he spends 1, 2 here. That's still not a quarter of 11, so he's not taking opportunity fire from these T-72s. 3, and then 3.5. He moves down into... Actually, hold on. These guys are going to back up a little bit. Actually, no, they'll stay where they are, but this guy is going to unload. Yeah, you don't want your vehicle, you don't want your infantry still in thin-skinned vehicles this close to all these big Russian guns. Trust me. So we're going to go ahead and unload the infantry, get the Challengers in there, and they're going to defend those big concrete buildings in that objective hex. That's a pretty secure position. So pretty happy with that. Alright, now we go to this headquarters section. He's going to have to make some pretty tough decisions. He is, you know what, he's going to fire at some more T-72s. So it's a pretty obvious choice. He's point blank right on him. He doubles from 28 to 56 versus 20. That only gives him a 2-to-1. Is there anything else I can throw in there? Nothing else can see those T-72s. He's just short of 3-to-1. That's kind of a crappy die roll. I need a 1 or a 2 to kill him. So let's see what I get. 2. A 2 will get it done. Awesome. Alright, so yeah, the Challengers, I mean, they did their best, but if they stay there, they're just going to get massacred. So they displace out of their firing positions. They did kick the Russians really hard in the teeth, but then it's time to, seek an urgent appointment elsewhere before they get, literally overrun. Because now, I mean, Russian tank platoons are all over the place at their point blank range. Up close, a Russian tank gun is just as accurate as anybody else's. I mean, we're talking about 150 meter ranges. Main battle tanks, that's not even point blank range. That is absurdly close. Even Russian tank gunners don't miss at that range. And that 125 millimeter smoothbore will go through Chatham on a Challenger at that range. By the way, real quick, I'll just go over the Challenger values. I mentioned this in the intro. Long story short, take your third shot. They now have the same values as most other NATO battle tanks. Because the main difference, certainly not the only difference, but the main difference, as far as I've been able to read so far, between a Challenger 2 and a Challenger 3 is they're finally getting rid of the 120mm rifle, and they're going with the same upgraded L55A1 120mm smoothbore that the Germans have on the latest Leopards. What was happening before was the Challenger had the 120mm rifle. Some people say that the reduced muzzle velocity was worth the accuracy, and vice versa, and there was all kinds of arguments, but one thing that you couldn't deny was that the old Challenger's ammunition was in two parts, and so that would slow rate of fire. So I did give the Challenger 2 a slight penalty. I think I gave it a 52. And, you know, Challenger fans all over the world, especially British tank enthusiasts, would definitely not appreciate that. But that was my logic. But here, they're firing the same tank ammunition as all their NATO partners. So, yeah, they basically have the same gun as everybody else now. They no longer suffer that two-part ammunition penalty. And we see the results. I mean, you know, already 8 T-72s are on fire. And so far, the British haven't taken any losses. They have been crowbarred off of that high ground now. And the Russians have this objective hex in a bit of a vice. They're coming in this direction. They're coming in from the north on the high ground. They're coming in from the east with motor rifles. It's going to get hot in here. I don't know if they're going to be able to take this objective hex. They've definitely got the British a little bit on the back foot here. That's for sure. And there we have it so far, folks. As you can see, so far, British tactics have revolved around seizing key terrain, assuming a good defensive posture, and then using the qualitative superiority of their units to maintain their rather limited numbers for as long as possible. The Russians, by contrast, they're using superior numbers and advancing along very unexpected axes of attack in order to put the British into some very unsavory dilemma decisions, where the British are going to be forced to either give up key terrain or take unacceptable losses. Sooner or later, probably sooner, the British are going to be forced into one of these decisions, and that's when the Russians have them. The question is, are Russian numbers going to hold out? As you can see, this battle isn't even close to being resolved. Please come back next week to see how the rest of this game shakes out. And that's where we're going to leave it for now, folks. Thanks very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Please remember to hit that notification bell. Also, please consider joining the Sitrep Podcast Discord. There is an auto-accept invitation link to our Discord in the description of this video. Join our community, see what everybody's up to, and best of all, show us what's happening on your hobby table. But for now, this is Risky Jim with the Sitrep Podcast. We are rounds complete for another episode. And as always, Tango Mike for watching.